To proceed. So this is the second part of this class on the 100th station of Imam al-Harawi's book, Manaazil As-Saa'ireen. It is the station on al-Tawheed, or the Oneness. And I will, inshallah, in the interest of continuity, and you know how respectful I have been to the announced times of the class, but in the interest of continuity, if I feel that I need 15-20 more minutes, I will carry on. It is very hard to pace yourself when you are discussing matters of this importance, because I don't want to do any injustice to the topic. And if I feel that I need more, then I'll defer the rest for next week, inshallah. Those of you who have prior engagements, please do not hesitate to leave in the middle of the class if you needed to leave. So we only covered the introduction and the three phases that the Shaykh talks about. In every station, the Shaykh divides the station into three different levels. We will talk about this now, inshallah. And the Shaykh says here, فَأَمَّا التَّوْحِيدُ الْأَوَّلِ. Now he talked to us about the three different types of tawheed. If you remember from last time, he said, you know, التوحيد على ثلاثة أوجه. الوجه الأول توحيد العامة الذي يصح بالشواهد، والوجه الثاني توحيد الخاصة وهو الذي يثبت بالحقائق، والوجه الثالث توحيد قائم بالقدم وهو توحيد خاصة الخاصة. Tawheed is of three meanings. The first is the tawheed of the public that gets rectified or validated by the indicants. The second is the tawheed of the elite, which is confirmed by the realities. The third is the tawheed that is established from eternity, and this is the tawheed of the elite of the elite. Okay, so the Shaykh starts here by the first type of tawheed, which is tawheed al-amma, or the masses, or the public, and he says, فأما التوحيد الأول فهو شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وهو التوحيد الظاهر الجلي الذي نفى الشرك الأعظم وعليه نصبت القبلة وبه وجبت الذمة وبه حقنت الدماء والأموال وانفصلت به دار الكفر من دار الإسلام وصحت به الملة للعامة وإن لم يقوموا بحسن الاستدلال بعد أن يسلموا من الشبهة والحيرة والريبة بصدق شهادة صححها قبول القلب. وهذا توحيد العامة الذي يصح بالشواهد، والشواهد هي الرسالة والصنائع، ويجب بالسمع ويوجد بتبصير الحق وينمو على مشاهد الشواهد. As for the first tawheed, it is the testimony that there is no God but Allah alone, no partner does he have, the absolute, who neither begets nor is he begotten, nor is there to him any equivalent. This is the apparent, self-evident tawheed, which wipes out the major shirk. It is the tawheed upon which the qibla was set and allegiance is deserved, and for which life and property are spared, and the land of disbelief becomes separate from the land of Islam, and the religion of the public becomes validated, even if they cannot justify it with demonstrative proofs. And this is after they become clear of misconception, ambivalence, and doubt upon a truthful testimony that is validated by the acceptance of the heart. This is the tawheed of the public that is proven by the indicants, and the indicants are the message and the creations, or the universal signs. It becomes binding by hearing the message. It is attained by the real's display, and it thrives on the demonstration of the indicants. And Ibn al-Qayyim, you see how beautiful this description is. Certainly, Ibn al-Qayyim is he says that how could you ask for more? Like, there is nothing beyond this. That this is the tawheed not of al-Amma, but of al-Rusul, and not of any Rasul, but Ulil Azm, and not of Ulil Azm only, but it is the tawheed of Ibrahim and Muhammad. And anyone of this ummah who thinks that they can reach a level of tawheed that is higher than that of Ibrahim and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is deluded. But there is a way to understand what the Shaykh will talk about in the second and the third levels without detracting from this first level. And that is what Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala tries to do all the time. He tries to understand the Shaykh within his conception about the Shaykh, that he is a scripturalist, the upright, devout scholar of Islam, scripturalist in his aqidah, which does not mean that, the mutakallimun are not upright or devout. It just means that it makes it easier for a scripturalist to read another scripturalist because he knows where he's coming from. That it is fair to basically give the Shaykh's writings a charitable reading that is consistent and compliant with the Sharia when we have known how he lived his life and what fiqh he learned and preached and taught, and what aqidah he defended and was persecuted for. So inshallah we will try to do this. But this is, there is no tawheed beyond this. We may basically explain other concepts that need to be fulfilled for the sort of enhancement of our tawheed and our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the following phases. But they are not separate from this. They are basically the perfection of this and founded on this, because this is the solid foundation. You build on it, you augment it, you beautify it, but you never walk away from it. So the Shaykh says, as for the first tawheed, it is the testimony that there is no God but Allah alone, no partner does he have, the absolute, who neither begets nor is begotten, nor is there to him any equivalent. This is the apparent. This, he's borrowing from Surah Al-Ikhlas, and that's 1/3 of the Quran, because it is the most description perfect of the tawheed of God and the oneness of God. That's why it is 1/3 of the Quran. There is nothing beyond the 1/3 of the Quran or greater than Surah Al-Ikhlas. It says this is the apparent, self-evident tawheed. And it is the greatest tawheed because it is the apparent self-evident. Its strength made it apparent and self-evident. The fact that, convoluted concepts don't have to be more noble than simple and plain concepts. In fact, the most noble should be the simplest and plainest of all. So this is this type of tawheed, the apparent self-evident tawheed, which wipes out the major shirk because of its strength. It is the tawheed upon which the qibla was set to unite the Muslims, and allegiance is deserved. That is al-wala al-imani. That is your allegiance for your co-religionists, your fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, and for which life and property are spared, which does not mean that the life and property of those who do not establish this type of tawheed are not spared. It just means that the combatant enemy, when they utter that word of tawheed, they are combatant enemies. They just killed your brother. They just killed your father, your actual biological father. And they are combatant enemy. And in the middle of combat, they just utter the word of tawheed and you restrain yourself. Because spontaneously, they become ma'soom, sacred. But it does not mean that peaceful, non-combatant people who do not establish this tawheed are not ma'soom. They are ma'soom. But in this particular context, even in the middle of combat, even someone who may have cut off your left arm and now says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, they become ma'soom. And you remember the hadith of Usama, how the Prophet ﷺ said to him, have you sort of seen into his heart? And the land of disbelief becomes separate from the land of Islam, and the religion of the public becomes validated, even if they cannot justify it with demonstrative proofs. If they cannot justify their tawheed with demonstrative proofs. So that does not mean that they have no evidence on their tawheed. They have evidence, but they may not speak in a way that is basically that satisfies the the philosophically schooled, or that satisfies people of sort of greater intelligence. It could be a very average person. إن البعرة تدل على البعير وإن الأثر يدل على المسير. That type of rationale, droppings indicate the presence of like a camel. Camel's droppings indicate the presence of a camel, and footprints indicate the presence of like a traveler. And that type of sort of simple, rationale, that's evidence. And that is strong evidence, and that is, sufficient evidence to establish darurat al-daruriyat, to establish, the most basic, fundamental, sort of a priori piece of information. And then, but they may not be able to speak to someone and establish sort of dialectically strong proofs. They may just have enough for their own faith, and in fact, Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah says, good for them, that their faith may be higher than the faith of the sophisticated, philosophically schooled elites in the sense, not in elites in faith, but elites in the sense of intellectual elites. And as you know, that there is the natural and experiential and evidentialist faith, and there is, faith by association, faith by persuasion, and faith by experience or experiential faith. And so the naturalist, the faith, and the experiential faith, it is that natural, spontaneous faith. Like you see the evidence, the clear, manifest, plain evidence for God, and you believe. It's spontaneous, it's natural, it's uncomplicated. You don't have to establish, basically, write a thesis about it, but it is strong. And it does not mean that there is no evidence, but it is not evidentialist in the sense that you could mention 1,000 proofs on the existence of God. And then you jump from this to the experiential faith. And then your experiential faith confirms this natural faith until you become of the vanguard and the elites among the faithful, even though you may not be able to write a thesis on the existence of God and sort of prove the atheist wrong. In sort of the usual dialectics or philosophical arguments. So, وَإِن لَمْ يَقُومُوا بِحُسْنِ الْإِسْتِدْلَالِ, even if they cannot justify it substantiated with demonstrative proofs. Because you know that there is a khitab, you know, the dalil al-khitabi and the dalil al-burhani, and the difference between the different adillah. The demonstrative proofs is about the dalil al-burhani. It is to establish philosophically coherent and sound proofs on your thesis or premise or your hypothesis. Then he said, and this is after they become clear of misconception, ambivalence, and doubt. So if they are clear from misconception, ambivalence, and doubt, they are way ahead of many evidentialist sort of believers, like the believers that depend on the sort of rational arguments. Many of them are not clear of misconception, ambivalence, and doubt. And then we all remember that lady from Naysabur. How do you say that in English? Nishapur? In English, Nishapur, yeah. They told her that Imam al-Razi knows 1,000 proofs on the existence of God, and her spontaneous reply was, Afillahi shak. Is there any doubt? To basically amass 1,000 answers. You know, certainly, and I'm not saying this about Imam Razi, but what she's trying to say is that to basically be busy amassing 1,000 answers, you must have had 1,000 doubts that you wanted to clear up. So the simple answer is, Afillahi shak, is there any doubt about God? So that type of faith, you know, natural and experiential faith, and clear of misconception, ambivalence, and doubt upon a truthful testimony that is validated by the acceptance of the heart. Upon a truthful testimony, because that's required, testimony, the announcement by the tongue, that is validated by the heart. You're not a hypocrite. There is congruity here between the heart and the tongue. What you're saying is what you are believing deep in your heart. Validated by the acceptance of the heart. And he says this is the tawheed of the public that is proven by the indicants, which is the sort of the evidences on this tawheed. The indicants are the shawahid, the evidences on this tawheed, whether they are heard, that's ayatullah al-matluwa, the signs of Allah that are recited or seen, that's ayatullah al-mar'iyya, in the universe. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. We will show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves until it is clear for them that it is the Quran, al-haq. So they correspond to each other. Both they augment each other, they correspond, and they corroborate each other, the different types of ayat. And so this tawheed is validated by shawahid. It is proven by shawahid. And then he says, وَالشَّوَاهِدُ هِيَ الرِّسَالَةُ وَالصَّنَائِعُ, and the indicants are the message, that's ayatullah al-matluwa, and the creations, that's ayatullah al-mar'iyya, signs of Allah in this universe. Then it is validated. He said, وَيَجِبُ بِالسَّمْعِ, it becomes a binding by hearing the message. وَيَجِبُ بِالسَّمْعِ, he is trying to sort of say to the Mu'tazila, it is not binding by the intellect or the sort of fruits of the intellect. So it becomes only binding upon receiving the message from God, upon receiving the message of God. But does it become binding by the intellect, بالسمع والعقل as well? Yes and no. If we mean by binding that Tawheed is binding before the messages, it is binding before the messages in that sense. If we mean that you become liable before the messages, it is not binding in that sense, because you're not liable before the messages. وما كان ربك ليهلك القرى بظلم وأهلها غافلون. وما كان ربك مهلك القرى حتى يبعث في أمها رسولا. But وما كان ربك ليهلك القرى بظلم وأهلها غافلون, this basically is perfect because it establishes some dhulm before the messages. So your Lord would have not destroyed a village because of their dhulm, because of their iniquity or their transgression, وَأَهْلُهَا غَافِلُونَ, while its people are heedless, meaning before we have sent warners to them, before we have sent messengers to them. So, but he described their heedlessness prior to the messages. So he described their iniquity and aggression prior to the messages as dhulm, right? What does that mean? It means that, Tawheed is good before the messages. Shirk is bad before the messages. Do you know the story of Hayy ibn Yaqdhan? It's like a philosophical written like a novel. It's a philosophical novel about a baby that was left on an island, or I guess it was like a ship, and he got on like a piece of wood and got onto the island and grew up on the island. A deer took care of the baby until he grew up, and then it's one of the most important pieces of philosophical narratives or novels written by Ibn Tufayl, Hayy ibn Yaqdhan. Just try to read it. It has been translated into English. But certainly he had also his sort of philosophical takes on organized religion at the end. But the moral of the story is that if you're left alone for your fitra to act by itself, then you will become a muwahhid, and you will find God. You will find God, the one true God. So this concept is established. Leave the fitra uncorrupted, and it will lead you to Tawheed. Tawheed is adl before the messages and the messengers, and shirk al-dhulm before the messages and the messengers. And af'al have inherent qualities of qubh and husn, inherent qualities of goodness and evil, of the different actions, aggression. If I sort of punch someone in the face now, or that act, but it depends certainly on the context and so on. But given that there is no prior aggression by the person or anything that makes them deserving of a punishment and so on and so forth, that act in and of itself is inherently bad. Now, when the messengers tell you that it is bad, then you become liable. Prior to this, you are not liable in the hereafter for your iniquities. You are not liable in the hereafter for your iniquities until you have received the message. So, yajibu bis-sam', it becomes a binding by hearing the message. We say that this means you become liable upon hearing the message, but it does not mean that it is not binding, prior to hearing the message. Clear? Tawheed is good before the messages, without the messages, because Adam came with a message. There was no before. But without the message, if you have not heard of the message, Tawheed is good, shirk is bad, inherently you could describe Tawheed as good and Shirk is bad or evil, right? Now, is it binding? It's morally binding. Are you liable? You're not liable until you get the message. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. And we were not to torment a people until we have sent to them a messenger. So, but the other ayah, and your Lord would have not destroyed a village because of their wickedness while they're heedless, before he had sent them a messenger, answers both ends. The end that says that there is no inherent qualities for any actions, and good is good because God said so, and bad is bad because God said so. And had God said that shirk is good, it would have been good, and tawheed is bad, it would have been bad. Or had God said that murder is good and charity is bad, murder would have been. So that concept, the right concept about this among Ahl Sunnah is that it is untrue, that actions do have inherent qualities to be recognized by the intellect. The intellect has this ability to discern between qabih and hasan, and actions have these inherent qualities, but sometimes they're situational in the sense that, you know, you could flog someone which may look bad, but if this is the authorities flogging them for a crime, then there is a situational value to be added here that will change the inherent nature of this action. The inherent nature of this action is that it is inflicting pain on a human being. But yes, within the context of being a punishment for a crime, it is not bad, it is good. So, but this does not take away from the fact that actions have inherent qualities, and they are good or bad by these inherent qualities, and that God ordains what is good. Throughout the Quran, Allah invites us to reflect, to use our mind, to أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا, to look, to اعتبر, to reflect, and so on and so forth. If the intellect is incapable of recognizing and separating good from bad and discerning between good and bad, what is all of this about? When Allah gives us the parables, the examples in the Quran, the different parables, ضرب الله مثلا رجلا فيه شركاء متشاكسون ورجلا سلما لرجل هل يستويان. So Allah gives the parable of a man who has sort of disputant owners. All of them are owning that one man, and a man that is owned by one. So that is an example of shirk and tawheed. So if you are mushrik, you are owned by different gods. And if you are muwahhid, you are all for one God. And you only have one God to basically seek and to pursue. So all of these are parables are addressing what? The intellect, and addressing the intellect's capacity to discern between good and bad. The only thing is that how do we Ahl Sunnah differ from al-Mu'tazila, who say that the intellect is capable? Ahl Sunnah say that it is capable, but you're not liable until you receive the message. That's it. You're not liable until you receive the message. We agree that they're capable of discerning good from bad. Limited, yes, but certainly the foundations of morality are inculcated in us, and we're able to discern. And we're able to figure out. That is why you see all people agreeing that kindness to animals is a good thing, for instance. عقوق الوالدين is a bad thing. cruelty with your parents, or like is a bad thing, and whether you are Muslim or not Muslim or this or that. So these foundations of morality are inculcated in us, and moral relativism is completely incoherent. That's postmodernist moral relativism is completely incoherent. As Chomsky says, that's not even false. It is not even false. It's like beyond that. So the idea here is it is binding by, the intellect leads you to it. The sam'a confirms what the intellect points to and makes you liable. But is the intellect sufficient? Of course not. Are we saying as al-Sunnah that the intellect can lead you to all the details? Of course not. We're talking about the foundations of morality here. But how to basically harness that justice in the economic system, you need guidelines. You need, basically guidance, divine guidance as to how to harness. Is riba bad? Many people said it is not bad. Their intellect did not lead them to the evilness of riba. This was beyond their intellect. Many people sincerely believe riba is not bad, sincerely believe it is good for the economy. They said that, bay' and riba are the same, are similar. Sales and, what is the difference between selling money for, like exchanging money for commodity and exchanging money for money? You exchange money for commodity with deferment and so on, and you're saying this is halal. Well, we're exchanging money for money. So yes, the aql is limited, but the foundations, things that are obvious, like tawheed, like, kindness to animals, the foundations of morality, the aql is capable of apprehending those facts, but you are not liable until you receive the message.
Is that like that? The Prophet didn't have the details in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Yeah, it is. He was the Prophet ﷺ was never a polytheist, but he was looking for the truth. يتحنث في دار حراء. He was in the, he was seeking God, seeking the one God. He did not commit any polytheism. He sought the one God, but then Allah gave him that guidance and all of the detailed guidance that he received. So the message gives you the detailed guidance and makes you liable, but before the message you were also had your fitrah not been corrupted and had you used your intellect properly, you would have been a muwahhid. Like, Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl and the other Hunafa of Quraysh. In the midst of all of this polytheism, there were people who rejected all of this, continued to be muwahhid, ala millat Ibrahim, following the religion of Ibrahim, without organized religion. They were not Christians or Jews, but alone, on their own, in the midst of all of this shirk of Quraysh and all of this peer pressure. They were not Christian, they were not Jews, they were not polytheists, they were muwahhideen. Then the Shaykh said, وَيُوجَدُ بِتَبْصِيرِ الْحَقِّ. So it becomes binding by hearing, and وَيُوجَدُ بِتَبْصِيرِ الْحَقِّ, and it is attained by the real's display. تبصير الحق. تبصير الحق, the real's display, to make you see it, to make you see it. That is a تبصير الكامل, which is a tawfiq. That is the complete disclosure, that is complete revealing, and not the pointing. Because the pointing, وَأَمَّا ثَمُودُ فَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ فَاسْتَحَبُّوا الْعَمَى عَلَى الْهُدَى. As for Thamud, we have guided them, but they preferred or favored al-'ama, blindness, عَلَى الْهُدَى, over guidance. So Allah said, فَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ, we guided them. But that is the guiding of what? Pointing, showing. But now tawfiq, to enable them to choose what is right, to show them what is right. You know, وَجَحَدُوا بِهَا وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُم ظُلْمًا وَعُلُوًّا. And they rejected it even though they were certain of it. So they were certain of it because Allah established the proofs on it. But then they rejected it. وَأَمَّا ثَمُودُ فَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ فَاسْتَحَبُّوا الْعَمَى عَلَى الْهُدَى. They favored blindness over guidance. You could, you know, be shown the light by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give your back to it, or basically cover it, suppress it. But tabsir al-haq means here tawfiq al-haq. Allah not only guiding you in the sense of pointing you to the truth, but also enabling you to choose the truth. وينمو على مشاهد الشواهد, and it thrives on the demonstration of the indicants. It thrives on the demonstration of the indicants. This type of tawheed thrives, this is the evidentialist faith. It thrives with more evidences. You see more, and this is good. And you know, there is no reality that cannot be, there is no truth that cannot be proven. And the more proofs, the more obvious the truth becomes. When we're talking about for some people, the superiority of natural and experiential faith, for some people over the evidentialist faith, we're not saying that evidentialist faith does not matter. We're not saying that the 1,000 proofs that Imam al-Razi knew for the existence of God do not matter, and there is no need for them. No, we're not saying this, but we are saying that faith is not only, you know, established through rational proofs. There is faith that is natural, that is your hiss al-batin, that is your wijdani sort of faith, that is the faith that is internal, your inner sense, the same way you feel hunger and you feel fear and you feel sadness, you feel the presence of God. Hunger, sadness, realities or not? Realities. Do you apprehend them by your external senses? No, you apprehend them by your internal sense, and that is faith that is apprehended internally, just like these realities are apprehended by your inner sense. So then, but it grows, and for many people that is how they acquire and grow their faith. And Allah invited us to look around, to travel around, and to look, and سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم, you know, and all of this. So clearly Allah is pointing us to the evidentialist faith as well, and telling us, grow your faith this way, but grow your faith through your prayers, your dhikr, and your focus on Allah. That's the experiential faith, and that's tasting and so on. That complements and augments that evidentialist faith. So it is not, there is no contradiction between them. They corroborate one another. Then the Shaykh said, وَأَمَّا التَّوْحِيدُ الثَّانِي الَّذِي يَثْبُتُ بِالْحَقَائِقِ فَهُوَ تَوْحِيدُ الْخَاصَّةِ وَهُوَ إسقاط الْأَسْبَابِ الظَّاهِرَةِ وَالصُّعُودُ عَنْ مُنَازَعَاتِ الْعُقُولِ وَعَنْ التَّعَلُّقِ بِالشَّوَاهِدِ. As for the second tawheed, which is confirmed by beholding the realities, it is the tawheed of the elite. It is the dropping of the apparent causes, ascending above the contentions of the intellects, and reliance on the indicants. Ascending above the contention of the intellects and ascending above reliance on the indicants. So he is saying here that this is about, you know, the beholding, the disclosure, the expansion, you know, the various stations in the section of the realities. So it is about Allah now shaping your heart. Allah now is forming your heart, is like granting, bestowing light on your heart from Him, not through the indicants, not through the indicants. So your dhikr and your night prayers, at the end of your night prayers, it could be a dark room. And you could have been repeating the same dhikr that you have known forever. But your faith grew exponentially at the end of your dhikr without any indicants. That does not mean the indicants are not needed, or that you will reject them now, or you'll move beyond them. You will complement them by your experiential faith. So when the Shaykh says it is the dropping of the apparent causes, the dropping of the apparent causes, we will not go back, and because you will need to go back and sort of read and the other stations, and learn about the other stations, because we talked about this in the other stations. So the apparent causes, cause and effect, can basically dim that light inside you. Your focus on cause and effect can dim that sense inside you that recognizes God, that sees the hand of God behind all the causes, the first cause and the final cause. Seeing the hand of God and seeing the first cause and the final cause in every cause and effect relationship. And seeing that not only that He's the first and the final, but He is the creator of the cause and the effect and the causal relationship. Important. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ غَافِلُونَ. So the people who know about the exterior, they know the cause and the effect, but they are heedless about the hereafter. It is important that you drop the al-asbab al-zahira, not a denial of them, but to prioritize your beholding of the first and final cause and the work of God, so that you imbibe your heart with that oneness of God, and demote the importance of the secondary causes, or demote the importance of the material causes, demote their importance in your heart. Do not deny them. It is important, as we talked about last time, that you don't deny them, but demote your importance so that the first and the final cause become supreme in your shuhud, or your witnessing, or your beholding. And then والصعود عن منازعات العقول وعن التعلق بالشواهد, ascending above the contentions of the intellects and reliance on the indicants, and certainly your ascendance or transcendence above the contentions of the intellects, because your faith now has been complemented, your natural evidentialist faith has been complemented by your experiential faith, that you are not subject to doubts anymore. Tasted faith. So it becomes not only a matter of conviction, but a matter of feeling as well. And keep in mind, even the evidentialist approach, even the science of Allah in the universe, they don't only nurture your convictions, they also nurture your feelings. So when you see something happening around you, an ayah of the ayat of Allah, it does not only speak to your mind, it also speaks to your heart. But if your heart is corrupted and unable to capture those messages, then it will be deprived of them. It will only go to your intellect. You'll say to yourself, yeah, that makes sense, but it will never touch your heart, because your heart is so corrupted and so sealed with your sins and your egotism and so on, that it is not getting. But the evidences Allah set up in the universe and in His book, they don't only speak to your intellect, they speak all the time to your heart. It is just that some people are unable to apprehend the messages that are coming to their heart. They can apprehend the messages that are going to their intellect. It depends on, certainly, that's a whole different issue now. But they can apprehend the messages that are coming to their intellect, but they are unable to apprehend the messages that are coming to their hearts. So if you open your heart up and cleanse it, now you will be able to imbibe it with those lessons and those benefits and those messages that are coming to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even through whatever He set up in this universe and in His revelation. So that you are not متعلق بالشواهد, not reliant on the indicants because you have the feelings now. وهو ألا يشهد في التوحيد دليلا ولا في التوكل سببا ولا للنجاة وسيلة. It is to not rely on the proofs in Tawheed, the causes in reliance, or the means in salvation. So one would be beholding فيكون مشاهدا سبق الحق بحكمه. So, but anyway, it is to not rely on the proofs in Tawheed because you have them, they are important. You will not basically move away, but you will build on them. But you're not reliant on the intellectual proofs because of what we just said. The causes in reliance, the causes ولا في التوكل سببا ولا في التوكل سببا, because he means to say that you have one, as long as you're looking at asbab and tawakkul, that tawakkul is basically to look beyond the asbab, right? Beyond the causes, for the causer, to ask the ultimate effector, God, and to look beyond the asbab. So you have reliance. We said that you will have to take precautions, make provisions, and engage the asbab. But your heart is dependent on what? God, not the asbab. But then tawakkul becomes a sabab in and of itself. That's what he means by wala fi tawakkuli sababa. Tawakkul, your reliance, it becomes another cause, and he doesn't want you to see that. He wants you to see the work of God alone, nothing from you, not even your reliance, because your reliance is not yours. So don't rely on the causes, and don't rely on your reliance, because your reliance could be another cause between you and God. Rely on God and don't see anything else, including your reliance. So فيكون مشاهدا سبق الحق بحكمه وعلمه ووضعه الأشياء مواضعها وتعليقه إياها بأحايينها وإخفائه إياها في رسومها. That is place, time, and form, substance, everything that exists. فيكون مشاهدا سبق الحق بحكمه. So one would be beholding the antecedents of the real with his wisdom and knowledge, and his placing things where they belong and making them contingent on their right times and hiding them in their forms, hiding the realities in forms, so that some people become people of realities and some people become people of forms. We said that awareness of the forms does not detract from your apprehension of the realities. You are aware of the forms, but you are able to see through them and see the work of God in them, and that He made those causes and those effects and made the effects contingent on the causes, and that He made everything come upon its right time in the right place, and created everything and hid it in its form. Because what does he mean by this? All the forms, this is a form. What is this? The power of God. This is not the power of God. This is a manifestation of the power of God. That's the reality. Power of the Creator, the perfection, the majesty of the Creator who created these fingers, and your fingerprint. So that's the form. The reality is the power of God. And you are looking at the form, unable to see through it, but He wants you to see, to not look at this. this becomes nothing in your beholding. Everything, manifestations of His grace, manifestations of His majesty, manifestations of the That, because all of the attributes are manifestations of the ipseity, the quiddity. وتحقق معرفة العلل, and basically he has mastered the recognition of the flaws in all the stations. ويسلك سبيل إسقاط الحدث, and now looks beyond the originated matters. Not isqat meaning lack of awareness, but isqat meaning removal from the focus of attention, demoting their importance in your shuhud to where they belong. And all of this, he emphasizes on the reality of God and basically the hints to our contingency and disposability. We see 481, that's shortly after the Muslims reached the peak of in the middle of the Khilafah al-Abbasiyya, and people have become heedless. Many people have become distracted. Many people have become heedless. Our history that we always sort of fantasize and sort of about, and is full of nobility and greatness by the vanguard, but it is also full of ugliness. And it started so early, to be honest. They were seeing a lot of ugliness, and they wanted to say to the people, aren't you the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What have you done to yourselves? Why don't you come back? So they are trying to tell them all of this around you is unreal. Unreal, not in the sense of ontologically unreal, but worthless. Focus on God. Come, to the path of purification. Come to the path, to the journey. Start your journey to God. It was overdone sometimes. The expressions sometimes are overdone, and they may have led some later to the problems of the heretical beliefs of union and unification and monism and pantheism and things of that nature. But what they're trying to say here is that you are being distracted, you're being deluded, you're being deceived. Come back. ويسلك سبيل إسقاط الحدث. So it now looks beyond the originated matters. هذا توحيد الخاصة الذي يصلح بعلم الفناء ويصفو في علم الجمع ويجذب إلى توحيد أرباب الجمع. This is the Tawheed of the elite, which is rectified or validated by the knowledge of self-annihilation, because the ego is the greatest distraction. So this is validated by self-annihilation, the knowledge of self-annihilation. That's the beginning, because it starts with the knowledge of self-annihilation, ilm al-fana. Since the ego is the greatest distraction from your focus on God, you have to remove the ego from the focus of attention, greatest distraction. It becomes purified by the knowledge of union, because union is a consequence to self-annihilation. Union is a consequence to self-annihilation, right? Can't have your togetherness with Allah unless you have lost yourself. And purified by the knowledge of union, وَأَصْفُوا فِي عِلْمِ الْجَمْعِ وَيَجْذِبُ إِلَى تَوْحِيدِ أَرْبَابِ الْجَمْعِ, and attracts to the tawheed of the masters of union, which is coming at Thalith, and we will go over it, inshallah, within the next half hour. So for the sake of continuity, to finish this concept. وأما التوحيد الثالث فهو توحيد اختصه الحق لنفسه واستحقه لقدره وألح منه لائحا إلى أسرار طائفة من أهل صفوته وأخرسهم عن نعته وأعجزهم عن بثه. As for the third tawheed, it is the tawheed that the real kept for himself. He alone is entitled to it because of his majesty. He displayed a flash of it to the inner souls of his most chosen and he made them unable of describing it and communicating it. This is what is referred to by the guides when they speak of dropping the originated and affirming the pre-eternal. والذي يشار إليه على ألسنة المشيرين أنه إسقاط الحدث وإثبات القدم. Keep in mind that al-Junayd did not say this. He said إفراد القديم من المحدث, separating, discerning. He did not say إسقاط, to drop al-muhdath, the originated, and to affirm only, meaning affirm only the reality of the eternal. But al-Junayd said to separate the qadim from the muhdath, to discern the qadim from the muhdath, to exonerate the pre-eternal above the deficiencies of temporality and origination. Okay, so what the Shaykh is trying to say here, that this type of tawheed is established only by Allah, and Allah showed a glimpse of it to His most chosen. And He make them unable to communicate it. They can't talk about it. They cannot talk about it. They cannot communicate it. Because this type of tawheed is going back to that point of pre-eternity when only God exists. This type of tawheed is almost a denial of our reality. That there is no reality but God's reality. It's almost a denial of our reality. The Shaykh is not a unionist in the hululi sense or ittihadi sense, but it is to a great extent a mental concept, not an extramental concept. So it is, you will, when you get to that point and just throw a blanket on this existence and see nothing underneath the blanket, look beyond to pre-eternity, then this reality around you will be almost unreal, disposable, contingent, transient, and all created and all controlled by the real. All created, all controlled by the real. This very movement is controlled and created by the real. So as if there is no reality except His reality. And in this case, can it be communicated? Communication needs like a receiver and sender. No communication. And any communication would complicate it, because it's about this sort of complete purity from temporal events and temporal beings. So any communication by a temporal being would be complicate it and will take away from it. If you want to say that, so how do we understand the Shaykh, and how do we try to, if we want to say that only God can establish His tawheed, in the sense that only God knows His greatness and majesty and His ipseity and His nature, that's true, right? Not even the prophets, not even the best of the prophets and the best of the creation know the ipseity of God the way it is. The way it is, the actual essence, that of God. They communicated to us what has been revealed to them from God. What has been revealed to them from God. But does anyone know the nature of God? The quiddity, ipseity, the nature of God? No. So can anyone establish tawheed in this sense that is befitting of God? No. That's why the Prophet said, لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. I cannot لا أحصي ثناء عليك. So I cannot count your praises, or I cannot praise you enough. That's what it means. I cannot praise you enough. أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. You are as you praise yourself. only you can recognize your greatness. If this is what the Shaykh is talking about, this is absolutely fine. This is what the Prophet told us. لا أحصي ثناء عليك. I cannot praise you enough. I cannot count your praises. I cannot praise you enough. You are as you praised yourself. So that is valid. But the fact that the Tawheed, the perfect Tawheed that is demanded of us, has been communicated to us is not without, is certain, a matter of certainty. That the prophets and messengers knew the perfect Tawheed that is befitting of God from us human beings, as far as we are capable of, establishing it. Human beings. That has been perfectly communicated to us. No one can claim to ascend beyond the Tawheed that has been communicated to us by Ibrahim and Muhammad alayhim as-salatu was-salam. And we have the perfect Tawheed in its entirety. The message of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was all about Tawheed, has been all communicated to us. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. It is verily we who brought down the reminder, and it is verily we who will protect it. It has been communicated to God through Jibreel, to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who communicated it to us. He did not betray his mission. He fulfilled it with excellence. He communicated to us the Tawheed that is required of us, and it is the perfect Tawheed that is demanded of human beings, and that's all we need. The fact that we cannot know the nature of God, that is not demanded of us. That we are barred from this, we're veiled from this. But that is, everything that is demanded of us has been communicated to us. So the Shaykh says here, على أن هذا الرمز في ذلك التوحيد علة لا يصح ذلك التوحيد إلا بإسقاطها. However, this very metaphor is a flaw in this tawheed that must be dropped for its rectification. What metaphor? إثبات الحدث وإسقاط إثبات القدم وإسقاط الحدث. So to affirm the antecedent, to affirm the pre-eternal, the reality of the pre-eternal, and to drop the originated, and to drop the originated. This is flawed. Why? Duality. You're still thinking that there is anything called originated. You're still thinking that there is something to be dropped. You're still thinking that there is somebody to drop. You are dropping the originated. So you're thinking that you're dropping, you're thinking that something out there to be dropped. It's all flawed. Because Tawheed is about the oneness, one reality. One reality in what sense? Not in the ontological sense. The Shaykh was not a unionist. One reality in the sense of the mental shuhud, the mental recognition. So then the Shaykh says, هذا قطب الإشارة إليه على ألسن علماء هذا الطريق وإن زخرفوا له نعوتا وفصلوه فصولا فإن ذلك التوحيد تزيده العبارة خفاء والصفة نفورا والبسط صعوبة. This is the core of the metaphors used by the scholars of this path, no matter how they excel in describing it and classifying it. For this Tawheed becomes only more concealed by explaining it, and more evasive by describing it, and more difficult by detailing it. Why? Because all of this is noise. It's ambient noise. It's temporal sort of beings and temporal descriptions and all of this. You want to go back to complete purity where none of this is applicable. That's the oneness of God the pre-eternal. So the more you talk about it, that talking is muhdath, is originated, it's temporal. It's your talking. That complicates, that stains, that tarnishes Tawheed. You want to not see anything except the one reality, the one. He wants to say the one. You know, the one God. He wants to say the one. That's it, and stop there. The one. So then he says, وإلى هذا التوحيد شخص أهل الرياضة وأرباب الأحوال وإليه قصد أهل التعظيم وإياه عن المتكلمون في عين الجمع وعليه تصطلم الإشارات ثم لم ينطق عنه لسان ولم تشر إليه عبارة فإن التوحيد وراء ما يشير إليه مكون أو يتعاطاه حين أو يقله سبب. He says, on this tawheed, the people of spiritual refinement, riyada, and possessors of sublime spiritual states fixate their gaze. It is what those who glorify the divine seek, and it is what the speakers about the essence of union refer to, and concerning which the metaphors collapse. No tongue has ever depicted it, and no expression has ever pointed to it, for Tawheed is beyond being pointed to by the creatures, apprehended by the times, or carried by the causes. All is clear. It's a sort of confirmation of what he wants to say, that anything that comes from the temporally originated, anything that comes from the temporal creations, tarnishes, complicates, convolutes Tawheed. It is about the simple oneness of the one reality, which is that of God. Yes. So he wants you, he does not want you to say there is nothing inside the cloak except God. He wants you to do because that's his history, that is his biography, that is his life story. Shaykh was Sharia compliant, seeker of the truth, who was committed to the worship of God all of his life, was committed to Sharia all of his life. But he wanted you to remove all of this distraction and noise from your sort of mind, so that you have the complete focus on God, and a complete sort of focus on God and attention to God, that the object of your attention now acquires an intimacy that belongs to the self, where you don't feel the self. So you're completely and permanently cured of your ego. Because your focus on the one reality of God has cured you of any awareness of the self. So you're cured of your ego. You're cured of all the flaws of the ego, because you're cured of the ego itself, because you don't feel it. You don't perceive it. You moved beyond it, stripped from it like a snake strips from its skin. So that's what he wants to say. And then he says, وقد أجبت في سالف الزمان سائلا سألني عن توحيد الصوفية بهذه القوافي الثلاث ما وحد الواحد من واحد إذ كل من وحده جاحد توحيد من ينطق عن نعته عارية أبطلها الواحد توحيده إياه توحيده ونعت من ينعته لاحد. No one ever singled the one out. For everyone who did is a denier. The tawheed of the one who speaks of his nature is but a loan that was dismissed by the one. توحيده إياه توحيده ونعت من ينعته لاحد. His singling out of himself is the real tawheed of him, and the descriptions of his describers are all false. So what does he mean by this? No one ever singled out the one. For everyone who did is a denier. La is jahad, is a denier of the oneness, because he wants to say that if you single him out, if you single him out, meaning separating him from others, you're recognizing others as of real nature, but you should not recognize others, so there is no need to single him out. And anyone who singles him out is sort of aware of themselves as the muwahhid, and there is no one but him to single him out. So that's what the Shaykh wants to say. Now, does he want to take you to union? No, he does not. Is he getting close? Yes, he is. Is this problematic statement? It is a problematic statement. Yet we will still understand it in accordance with the Shaykh and the Shaykh's life. And how do we understand it? لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. That is how we will understand it. I cannot praise you enough, you as you praised yourself. You are as you praised yourself. Within that context, move. That is your limit. You know, the prophetic expressions are perfect, and Sa'id, the winner, is the one who will limit himself to the prophetic expressions. Certainly, Quranic expressions, the most perfect, and then next to only to the Quran is the Prophet's expressions. So now, no one has adequately singled him out in the complete sense of recognizing his majesty and recognizing his greatness. Anyone who thinks that they have worshipped him enough, praised him enough, wahadahu enough, singled him out enough, is a denier. Is a denier of what? Is a denier of the true nature of God, the greatness of God. If you really think that you have worshipped God enough, known God enough, praised God enough, you are a denier of God, of the magnitude of God. Who are you? لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. توحيد من ينطق عن نعته عارية أبطلها الواحد. The tawheed of he who speaks of his nature is but a loan that has been dismissed or rejected or something by the one, or proven false by the one. The oneness proves your description false, or your speaking of his nature false, because if you are saying that this is my description, if you say إفراد القديم من المحدث, if al-Junayd feels that, what a beautiful statement, and it is, what a perfect statement, and it is. But if the Junayd feels that this is his statement, that this is al-Junayd's statement, Junayd now is in trouble. He's attributing his action to himself, unable to see that this is Allah's, because he is his creation. And it is Allah who gave him tawfiq to making this statement, and it is Allah who created the statement, not created his tongue, created the movement of the tongue, created the apprehensions of the heart, created his own thought, created everything. So in this sense, everything is loaned to us. We're living on a loan. Everything is ariya. And that is why, when the story of Abu Talha and Sulaiman, she said to him, if Allah gave loaned a loan to us and took it back, talking about her son. Everything is a loan. even your own actions. Everything is a loan from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And since everything is loaned to you, any thought of ownership, any thought of independent agency, your independent agency is certainly an deviation, perversion from this tawheed, because you are yourself living on a loan. And then the Shaykh said, توحيده إياه توحيده ونعت من ينعته الأحد. His singling out of himself is the real tawheed of him. And the descriptions of his describers are all false. What does that mean? It means that only him can recognize his oneness, his greatness, and وَنَعْتُ مَنْ يَنْعَتُهُ الْأَحَدُ could mean two things. Lahad as a denier, like a real, lahad means, you know what al-Haj means, atheism? It means to deviate from the upright path, to deviate from the upright path. So the deviation here, al-Lahad and al-Haj, deviation is not always complete deviation. Sometimes it is incomplete deviation. If the Shaykh means incomplete deviation, we will say here that if you think that you have praised him enough, that is incomplete deviation. But if he is talking about lahad in the sense of complete deviation like kufr, that is when you describe him by that which he has not described himself, by that which is counter to what he has described himself, to be more accurate. To describe him by that which is counter to how he described himself, that is disbelief or al-Haj. But short of this, to your descriptions of him, your not of him, your praise of him, will always be lahad in the sense of a shortcoming. It will be short of what is due to him. It will be short of his rights on us. It will be short of the praise that he is entitled to, no matter how much you praise him. If you spend your entire life in prostration, like some of the angels, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would have not praised him enough, and you would have not worshipped him enough. And in this sense, we try to understand these three verses. Can they mean problematic concepts? Yes, we will not understand them to be problematic. Are they suboptimal? Because they are vague and they could lead to problematic concepts. Yes, we wish the Shaykh had used clearer expressions so that they would not lead to any problematic concepts or any deviation. But we will understand them to mean what the Shaykh lived by and what the Shaykh preached throughout his life. The bottom line is لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. قل قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.